if you're using Microsoft Azure, there's a service that you're using which is holding lots of data which may be really useful for you. That service is called Log Analytics. In today's video, I'm going to go over how to create a Log Analytics workspace. We're going to show you how to create some data collection rules and how to do some key queries so we can look at the data being collected. If you're not sure what Log Analytics workspaces are, if you don't know what a data collection rule is, or if you just have to some best practices, then stick around because that's what we're going to cover today. So first of all, let's talk what is a Log Analytics workspace and what does it collect and how can we query it. A Log Analytics workspace is essentially a location where we can hold lots of data. We get all that data from our servers in Azure or workstations. That can be either through Azure Virtual Desktop, it could be workloads, it can be any type of virtual machine. Essentially what happens is we deploy an agent onto that host, and then we use something called the data collection rule to define what sets of data that we want to collect. And then basically the agent then feeds that data straight into a Log Analytics workspace. We then use something called a KQL query to basically query that data, or you can create dashboards as well. This can be useful for a number of different scenarios. We can use this from Sentinel from a security perspective. We can collect the event logs, right? Application security system event logs, and feed those into Log Analytics workspace. And then Azure Sentinel can connect to that Azure Analytics workspace and then look for data collection. The other method that is quite popular is we can use it for, say, Azure Virtual Desktop. We can collect performance data of the session host, CPU, memory, disk IOPS. We can create dashboards or set up alerting. So there's a number of different use cases you can use for your server estate. If you want to monitor when your servers are going over 90% of CPU or memory, we can do that and set up alerts. Multiple use cases and a very good solution. Now, the downside is it can cost a lot of money. We'll do a quick deep dive around cost and how much it costs. But first of all, what we're going to do, we're going to go and create a Log Analytics workspace, create a data collection rule, and then show what kind of data that's pulling back. All right, so that's enough for the theory today. Let's get into it and start creating a Log Analytics workspace. Now let's go into the Azure portal and have a look at this stuff. I am in the Azure portal. So what I've actually done, I've actually created a resource group. So we can see here, I have a Log Analytics resource group, which I've created, which is empty, just so we can show you the type of resource that's been created. Okay. All right, so the first thing we need to do, we need to create the Log Analytics workspace, right? So let's go and do that. You can see here, we've got Log Analytics workspaces. So we're going to create that. And you can see here, I've got a couple of existing ones that Nerdio is managing, but just for completeness, I'm going to show you how to do in the Azure portal. And then what we'll do as well a bit, and then later in the video, we'll show you how Nerdio manages all these as well. But I just want to show you the native stuff as well, because I appreciate not everybody uses Nerdio. We are going to go and create this Log Analytics workspace. Now, a thing to point out here as well is you can see how I've got different ones. People approach it differently depending on the complexity of the environments. Some companies have like just one central Log Analytics workspace where basically everything is being injected into. Others do it on a per service. Others do it on a per department basis because it's based on the cost, right? Who's actually going to pay for that data? So there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It depends on your security requirements as well. For data sovereignty, for example, if you've got multiple regions, you may have to have one Log Analytics workspace per region. You can have data from multiple regions going into one Log Analytics workspace as well. For example, if I create a Log Analytics workspace in UK South, I can have data from North Europe, West US, Asia, etc., all going into that workspace. Okay. All right. So let's go and create one. We're going to create here. So resource group. I'm just going to show you that Log Analytics workspace group here. Instance name, so it's going to be U2 tests. There you go. And I'm going to host in North UK, and you can see here I can host them in multiple regions as well if I wanted to. All right, tags, we're not going to set any tags, but if you need a tagging, that's where you create this. So that's going to run some validation, and you can see pricing tiers. I'll go into the pricing shortly, but there is costs associated with this, and you do need to be really careful. Hundreds or thousands of session hosts or servers putting data in here can get very expensive very quickly. Okay, we're going to basically create that. So create that. So let's initialize deployment. So we'll be back shortly. That deployment is now complete. As you can see here, if we go to the resource, we now have our Log Analytics workspace. Let's head over into the resource groups and I'll show you. Resource groups, and we go to Log Analytics. This is the Log Analytics workspace. that we've got. And if I just click on that, it takes me back into there. All right, we've got this Log Analytics Workspace. How do we actually get data into the Log Analytics Workspace? For that, we have something called the Data Collection Rule. Okay, so a Data Collection Rule is going to define what data I'm collecting. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go and set a data collection rule, and then basically you set the data collection rules for the servers or AVD session host or whatever client you're using, and then you can send that data into there as well. So you can see here it's saying collect a data source, configure monitoring solution, and workspace health as well. Okay. You can also set this on the VMs themselves. So you can see here it's asking us to create a data collection rule. So rule name, we are going to create a DCR. That's my data collection, my subscription, MVP subscription, then the resource group. I'll put everything in here so you can see it. Region, this is the region that my VMs are going to be in. So I'm going to select UK South. Platform type, so Windows or Linux. So if you can do all if you want to, but for my testing I've just got Windows. Data Collection Endpoint, so this is something which is quite new. It's not mandatory, it's optional. So basically what this is, it's basically a proxy type solution. By default you can send data from the session host straight into the Log Analytics Workspace, or if you want to you can create a data collection endpoint. Imagine if you've got a couple of VMs in West and North Europe, for example. I can create a data collection endpoint in UK South, North Europe, wherever. We can send all that data into that, for all UK South data, and then we can basically just send all that data into the Log Analytics Workspace, or I can even filter that data. So rather than having the cost of everything, you can be quite selective about what data you want to pump into the data collection endpoint from the... You can be selective about what data goes from the data collection endpoint into the Log Analytics Workspace, so that can keep costs down a bit as well. So for simplicity and for the sake of this demo, we're just going to go straight into the Log Analytics Workspace. But if you, again, I mentioned your data sovereignty, or if you've got a lot of hosts, for example, it may be worth looking at the data collection endpoint further. You can create ones outside of here as well. Right, so what we're going to select once, so we're going to select none, okay. Going to go to resources, so pick a resource to collect data from. The Azure Monitor agent will be automatically installed, right? So Azure handles all that for you, okay? It uses the VM extension to install that for you. And what we can do here, we can add the resources, and this will also enable the system manager identity that gets enabled by default as well. Right, so add resource. So what that's going to do, that's going to go away and it's going to look at all my resources in my environment. And let's go to servers. I can see that I've got one for the domain controller, or I've got some, I'll have some session hosts in there as well. So if I go down to host boards for this demo, I'll select the domain controller. So we'll click DC1, click apply. Okay, so that's going to take data from that machine. So imagine if your environment, you could just select everything if you wanted to, and that'll start pulling data in from there. Next, collect and deliver. Name add data source. Which data source to collect? Or add data source. The data source is going to be performance counters, the data on the actual VM, or Windows event logs. So you can imagine if I'm like a domain controller, I maybe want to monitor it for security purposes, but also monitor it for performance reasons as well. So let's collect a bit of both. So we're going to select performance counters. So this is going to basically collect CPU information, right? It's going to select memory, disk, and network. So you could do custom as well. If you wanted to customize these as well, the more data you put in here, and the shorter the sample rate is, the more it's going to cost you. So it's about getting that in between. What we'll do here, we'll just select basic, and then we're also going to do some event logs as well. So which kind of event logs we want. So I'm a domain controller, right? So if I want to collect information, I'm going to do audit success and failure, and maybe I want to do the system critical error, or you can do verbose. Again, it's about working out, okay, what data do I want? How much data do I need, for example? So I'm just going to select these as well. So I'll collect all that data. So it's done that. Then we've got the destination. We're telling it I want to collect all performance data, event log data. Where do I want to send that data to? Okay, so we're going to click add a destination. Azure Monitor Logs, MVP subscription. You can see here that we're able to select which one. So we're going to send this to our YouTube test Log Analytics. You can see that here. I'm going to select add data source. What have we just done here? We created a Log Analytics Workspace we have created a data collection rule. So we told it, hey, I want to collect event log data and performance data. And then what we've done there, we've then told it to send it to this Log Analytics Workspace we created. So click review and create. It's going to create all that stuff. So click create. Successfully initiated extension installation. So what does that mean? An agent, Azure Monitor agent, gets deployed onto the server session host, and then from that's basically install the agent onto the VM, and then that collects the data and sends it into the Log Analytics Workspace. So if I go to my domain controller now, for example, what I will see is DC1. Okay, so that's Find My Virtual Machine. And then if we go to extensions and applications, you can see that it deployed an Azure Monitor Windows agent. So I've gone onto the VM, gone to extensions and applications, and from there you can see provisioning succeeded, and it's deployed version 1.3.7 of the Azure Monitor Windows agents. That's what's happening under the hood, and it's using PowerShell DFC to deploy that agent as well. That's pretty much all you have to do, right? So now what we're going to do, we're having all that data going into the Log Analytics Workspace, and then what we'll do now, we'll look at, hey, what do we do with this data? How can we read this data? Okay, so we use something called KQL queries for that, right? We'll go and do that now. Before we go do that, I just want to quickly show you what resources have been created in here. So you can see here we've got two resources. The first is the Log Analytics Workspace that we created, and then we've got this data collection rule that we just created as well. Okay, if I click on there, you can see data sources, connected resources 1, which is that session host that we've got. Okay, also domain controller that we've got. So if I click on that, it'll show us this is the resources which is doing. Okay, so that's basically, it's again quite simple, not massively complicated. And you can see here you can disassociate it, or you can edit it, or you can do some funky stuff within there as well. But yeah, now we'll go into and actually see what data's been collected. Okay, so now we're going to look at a existing Log Analytics Workspace that I've got, which has got some host data setting into there. So you can see here, if we go to monitoring insights, I can see the ingestion, the number of hosts, and the number of retention. Then it'll basically show you how much data is in there. And then we go over to the usage. You can see this is all the performance data that it's capturing. We can see some event logs being captured. You can see 80% of the data is performance data. And then we look at the health, so that's going to look at the actual availability, and then the agents. So this is going to show us the agents, the session hosts. As you can see here, I've got an agent now pumping data into this Log Analytics Workspace. And then we can also see what data collection rules are applied to this workspace as well. Okay, all right, so that's all very good. What do we do with this data? How can I actually query this data? We need to go into the logs, and then from the logs we can run something called KQL query. If you want to see all the tables and stuff, you can look in here and it'll show you what's happening underneath the hood. This is all the data being pumped into there as well. Now I'm going to go into the logs and run some basic KQL queries, and then you'll be able to see what's actually happening. Here we can see the log. You've got some existing queries that you can run by default. For example, if you go to virtual machines, you can see what data is being collected, so I can click that and run that, and that'll basically tell me what stuff is being collected. Okay, so that's quite useful. The biggest benefit is come when we go into basically something called KQL mode, right? And from here we can run something called KQL queries. Right now, this is where ChatGPT really comes into its own. So yeah, KQL is simple. Okay, you can see there it's told me what this KQL query is. We can go and create our own. So what I'll do now is I'll jump into ChatGPT. We'll use AI to do this, and then we'll create some KQL queries and pull out some data. All right, so we're in ChatGPT. So what I'll do now is I'll say, please create me a KQL query that I can run in Azure Log Analytics Workspace that will return the CPU usage over the past 24 hours. Okay, so hopefully what that will do now is going to generate me this KQL query, and then I can basically take that, copy and paste that, and put it into Log Analytics. Okay, so it's giving me two results. So what we'll do now is we will take that and I'll copy and paste that into the log. Okay, so then we'll take that and then I'll basically paste that into there. Okay, so is this going to work? We will see. So run that now. No results, so no, it didn't work. So I'm just going to go back, troubleshoot that, and I'll be back in a second. After a bit of to and fro with ChatGPT, we've got a worky one. I find ChatGPT sometimes a bit hit and miss when we're working with KQL queries. Let me just show you what we've got. So you can see here, we've got perf, which means it's collecting all the perf counters. Where time generated equals up to 24 hours. Where object name equals processor, so it's using the processor key, and then it's basically collecting these values, summarizing it, and then giving me a time chart. Let's just go and do that. So just do that. Okay. So that they run that, and then basically gives you this chart as well. Okay, so very useful. That's how we do the KQL queries. We can also do it for event log data as well. Let's go and do that now, and let's show you some event log data. Okay, what we've got here is something showing us events from the domain controller, right? We'll notice it up earlier. Let me just explain what this is doing. So basically, what you use your query to set the time period to be over 24 hours. Okay, we can also set it up here as well, and then I'm searching for event. So the main ones you'd use would be event and then perf equals performance counters, event equals event logs. We've got where time generated up to a day ago. You've got where event ID equals 4776, right? So I'm looking for a particular event ID, so you can customize, and that's whatever you want. And then project, which basically show time generated, computer, event level name, event ID, render description, and order by time generated. So that's essentially what these KQL queries are. It's like basic natural language which you can use. They're just some of the basic stuff that you can do with that, and you can customize your own performance count. You can customize your own that you need to run. You've got your own predefined ones as well. If I just go to logs, you've got some ones that you can just set. So if I go to virtual machines, you can collect virtual machine disk free space, for example. That's not got enough data yet, but that will normally show you that. So that's how you use KQL queries. So there's lots of Microsoft documentation, use ChatGPT, AI, whatever, to generate those. Okay. All right, so now we'll just go over very quickly how do you actually get the Azure Virtual Desktop service data in there as well, because this is just looking at those data, but how do we actually get the Virtual Desktop service? So what we can do there is if I go to Azure Virtual Desktop, okay, we'll go away from there, then we go into Monitoring Insights. Monitoring Insights is how you get the service data from the Azure Virtual Desktop service itself. We can see utilization, logons, that type of thing. At the host pool level, we can also tell it to put data into that Log Analytics Workspace as well. So if I go to like maybe one of my host pools, for example, if I go to diagnostics settings, you can see basically here, Nerdio's done this automatically for you. I'll show you how to do that shortly. We can actually send data from there into the Log Analytics Workspace. That can send error messages, management, connection information, host registration information, network data logs. So just gives you auto scale logs for the host pools. If I click on here, you can select which ones you want to put in there, and then click send to Workspace, pick whichever one you want in there. You can then query that for the Azure Virtual Desktop service data as well. And now for one of the most important things, how much is this data costing me? Because this can be very expensive in a large environment. So let's take a look at that. In the Log Analytics Workspace, you have this tab called Usage and Estimated Costs. Okay, so this is basically showing you what the costing is, what you're currently using. Okay, so you can see for me, just as an example, this is a small dev environment. I've probably got just 5 session hosts in there that I turn on and off all the time, and it's costing me like $7 a month. You can imagine times that by 100 session hosts, it can get very expensive very quickly. So what I normally recommend to customers is keep an eye on this, right? Because keep an eye on what data you're collecting and whether you're actually going to use that data or not. It gives you a breakdown of data ingested by table over the last 90 days. You can see the usage data. 2.49 gigs of that data is actually performance data from performance counters. It's collecting that data from the performance counters, and you can see that in the chart as well. If you know that you're going to need that data, then you can get a discount. So if you click on that, I can see that's how quick the cost can get. So if you pay $7,500 a month, for example, you can get like 100 gigabits a day committed. Or if you're in the big boy league, you want to do 50,000 gigabytes, which is like 5 terabytes or 50 terabytes, and you can pay $2.8 million a month. It can get very expensive very quickly. What I'll do now is show you something which I use all the time, and it's basically looking at your log analytics data and then working out which performance counters I need to optimize and which ones are costing me the most money. So let's go and do that. I'll also show you very quickly how to do that in Nerdio and how we can use Nerdio to reduce that cost as well. All right, so I'm in the Nerdio screen where we can manage this. First of all, what we now see is a very high level overview of all the different Log Analytics workspaces that we've got. We can see there it's showing us the estimated total cost as well, right? So it's a very good overview screen. Now, what we can also see is the retention period. The retention period is quite important. Retention period is how long do we need to keep the data for. Some companies don't even look at the data, so they're quite happy with the default 30 days. You may want to keep data retention, like event log data, for example, for a year, 6 months, 3 months, or whatever. It depends what your security policy is. Obviously, the longer you have the data, the more you're going to pay for it. So what we'll do now is we'll have a look, how can we reduce that cost? So you can see here we've got this guy, so he's going to have 262 gigs worth of data, and we're using 15 gigabits a month, and it's costing us $72 a month. Can you imagine in a large environment it's going to cost us more, a lot more, like thousands of dollars per month. So we're currently at 196 gigabits a month. If we click on this edit retention button, what that tells us is give the option to change the retention. So if I change that down to say 60 days, for example, Nerdio is actually going to tell us how much money we're going to save from doing that. We'll just come back to it a second now. We've got a decrease of 184 gigs worth of data, and then that's also going to decrease the cost by $22. I've done this in a few custom environments and I saved thousands of dollars per month. Now, the second one is which performance counters are we collecting. If I click on manage counters, it takes me into a screen. This is the data collection rule. From here, I can see which of these performance counters is actually costing me money. You can see here, user input delay per process is the normal culprit, and this is 81% of that data, which means it's 81% of the cost of that resource. So if I don't need this, I can just change it to 360, for example, change the sample rate. What that will do is go down here, then again that's going to show me the cost of that. So there you go, decrease of 14 gigabits and therefore a decrease of $40 a month. If you combine that with retention, you've got a considerable saving. Then also you can select which event logs you want to view within there as well. So that's how you can optimize the costs. Say normal customers have saved somewhere like $40,000 a year. In extreme circumstances, I've seen that go into 6 figures. Sometimes people don't even know they're collecting this data. So it's definitely very important to keep an eye on that. I think we're at the end of the video. Yeah, so just a quick recap what we talked about. So we've gone through what is log analytics. Okay, we've gone through what is a data collection rule, and then we've gone through, okay, here's how you deploy those, and here's how we query the data and how we can plug that into the Azure Virtual Desktop usage as well. But this applies to all Azure resources, right? Not just service, but any service that Azure uses. Most of it you can plug into a Log Analytics Workspace and query it for metrics, security data, whatever you want. Be very careful because it can cost you a lot of money. When you're thinking about what data is your support team going to find useful, how often do we need to collect that data, and then from there we can define some data collection rules, then hopefully keep that cost down to a minimum. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe button. I'll be back next week for another one. Thanks, bye bye.